The Temple of Light had stood for generations in the Kingdom of Light, Lumeria. In all the time the bastion had operated, few events shook it to its core. The arrival of the legendary Soul Stone of Aetherius was one such occurrence. Inquisitor Darian was a man of discipline and devotion. His faith in the light had inspired him in his youth to become a cleric, to spread the teachings of the blessed throughout the continent of Aetheria. He had proven time and again that with faith all things were possible. But as he had aged, his spirit and optimism had been clouded by the unrelenting darkness that threatened to spill out across the borders of the foreboding dark lands. His teachings had turned to questions. Questions not of the light that he held so dear, but of those who lived as good citizens of the Kingdom of Light and the surrounding kingdoms. In every corner of the continent, shadows were gathering, and the rate at which the darkness expanded was only advancing. Darian had begun to crumble under the weight of his burdens. His piety turned to what he considered redemptive violence. If the people he persecuted were truly light-blessed, then they would be judged by the light and found innocent. Even so, his path of redemptive violence caused his soul to waver. He had begun to doubt, not the light, but himself. As the Inquisitor ruminated on the tragedies that he had participated in creating, a scribe entered his chambers. "Lord Inquisitor, there is something you must be informed on." Darian looked across his desk and surveyed the young man. "What is it?" the Inquisitor asked. The scribe took a breath and began, "Lord Inquisitor, someone has teleported a stone to the temple." Darian raised an eyebrow. "A stone? What has this to do with me?" "Lord Inquisitor, I do not know, but your presence is requested. As for the stone, it's, well, huge." The Inquisitor's brow furrowed at the statement. Nonetheless, he stood and followed the panting scribe out of his chambers and through the labyrinthine hallways of the Temple of Light. Finally, they exited into a wide courtyard where a huge pearl of swirling purple and black energy rested on the ground. Darian felt his breath catch upon seeing the magnificent, terrifying sight. His brain whirred into action as he thought of what could explain the phenomenon. And yet, despite many years of study, none of the answers he could come up with provided any enlightenment. His eyes tracked to a gathering of priests who had already begun casting their magics upon the shimmering pearl. A senior stood among them with a serious expression on his face. "Elder Eustace, what is this thing?" The old man looked at the approaching man and smiled serenely. The act struck Darian as odd, considering the dark corruption that oozed off of the giant stone. The smile persisted on Elder Eustace's face as he said, "It is a truly remarkable victory. What you see is the soul stone of Aetherius." Darian's breath caught in his chest as he heard the words. Of course he knew what it was, but how could one even imagine the legendary artifact would appear out of nowhere? "Elder, how is this possible?" The elder turned back to look at the soul stone as its corruption fought back against the purifying prayers of the priests. "The master of the Mage Pagoda has sent this himself. In his message he told us of how the Dark Lord had claimed the stone and begun corrupting it for his own ends. With courage, the master of the tower and his companions have invaded the Dark Lord's citadel and dispatched the stone's guards. With his magic, that man has teleported the stone to us for purification." Shock could readily be seen on the face of the Inquisitor. To invade the Dark Lands and steal something so legendary, it was remarkable. But even more concerning was the Dark Lord's acquisition of the Soul Stone. Aetherius was the primordial deity of magic and creation. It was on his bones that the very world he stood upon was built. To claim the power of a god, the Dark Lord would have been impossible to defeat if his corruption of the stone had been completed. Inquisitor Darian looked to the elder once more. What would you have me do? Elder Eustace nodded, his smile fading. With this artifact in our possession, the Dark Lord and his minions will not sit idle. We will be under threat very soon. I do not worry for those within the temple, but those beyond our walls are unknowns. You must begin your inquisition once more. Root out any who would sympathize with the darkness throughout the territory. This must be done. Inquisitor Darian felt the burden of duty upon him once more. I will do what must be done. With a final look at the towering pearl, the Inquisitor turned and returned to his chambers to collect his tools. It would not be joyous work that awaited him, but it would be necessary.